control of the nafs is the root cure of every single disease of the heart. And before we talk about how we can take control of the nafs, what exactly is the nafs? To put it simply, the nafs is the part of you that has desires. Whenever you desire anything in this life, it originates in the nafs. It's the part of you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that desires things. And that's why, guys, the nafs is actually way more destructive than the shaitan. Yes, way more destructive than the shaitan. Because if the shaitan can't get you to do a specific sin, he'll stop trying with that sin and go to a different sin. Whereas the nafs will never ever leave you until you fulfill that evil desire that's in your heart, or until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects you from it. Because it's an innate thing that's just there. You want something so bad and you desire it so much until you act upon it. And so that's why it's very, very important for us to take control of our nafs. And this is where you need to pay attention, because it's going to get super interesting. When we journey through the Quran and we inspect the verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the nafs, we'll realize that there are 3 levels Allah has mentioned in the Quran about the nafs. 3 levels. Level 1 is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it an-nafs al-ammara. In the verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna an-nafsa la-ammaratun bis-su'. Indeed, the nafs is ever inclined to evil. This is level 1 of the nafs. This is the nafs that has overpowered you. It's taken control of you. Whenever it commands you to do any sort of desire, you act upon it. And these desires most of the time are evil desires. Go and waste time, be lazy, have a lot of food, go out and even drink. Rhyad Dadah, may Allah protect us. Whenever it commands you to do something, you act upon it. And so you find that this person who has a nafs al-ammara, he sins willingly over and over again and feels little to no remorse. And as the saying goes, this person is someone who eats, sleeps, fulfills their desires and repeats. That is level 1 of the nafs, an-nafs al-ammara. Then when you look at the other verses in the Quran, you realize that there is level 2, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it an-nafs al-lawwama. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ. And I swear by the self-blaming nafs. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest. So whenever He swears about something in the Quran, that thing He swears about is always great. And this type of nafs is a great type of nafs. And nafs al-lawwama is a nafs that basically scolds you and blames you whenever you disobey Allah. It fights you whenever you're not doing enough good deeds. It's always on your case. Whenever you transgress, it feels bad. It makes you filled with regret. This is the type of nafs of a nafs al-lawwama. And so you find that the person who has a nafs al-lawwama is always battling with themselves. They're always having a fight with themselves. Do more good. Stop doing that. Stop doing this. And so you find that person, he does some sins and he stays away from some sins. So he's like halfway between. He does some sins and he does some good. And they're always having a battle with themselves. That's level 2, a nafs al-lawwama. And subhanAllah, this is where we reach level 3, which is the greatest type of nafs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give it to all of us. This is the nafs that is known as an-nafs al-mutma'inna. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyatuha an-nafs al-mutma'inna. Allah will say to the righteous people in the Day of Judgment, O tranquil nafs, the nafs that is tranquil, that is filled with peace. And nafs al-mutma'inna is the greatest type of nafs. This is the nafs that has reached a special level with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This nafs is a nafs that, it's just content and tranquil with everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. Whenever there's any evil that happens in this person's life, he says, Alhamdulillah. And you see him just filled with peace and tranquility. We've seen crazy amounts of this type of nafs from Palestine, subhanAllah al-azim. When you reach that level, wallahi, nothing will shake you. And this nafs is like miles and miles and miles away from sins and evil desires. In fact, this nafs, the only thing that it wants is the pleasure of Allah. So do you know what this nafs does? It actually commands that person to do more good. It pushes them to increase in more good. You find this person just filling their life, helping people, putting more things out which is beneficial for the ummah, and so on and so forth. You see them in good spirits all the time. They could be the people with the most hardships out there. But wallahi, when you look at their face, you see a sense of tranquility. This is an-nafs al-mutma'inna, the best type of nafs, the 3 levels of nafs, the top of them, the best of them, the creme de la creme. And so guys, as we've mentioned the 3 types of nafs, this is where the key point is, and this is where you need to really pay attention. If you never work on your nafs, you will always be stuck on level 1, an-nafs al-ammara. If you're someone who never cares about your nafs, you never reflect inwards, you never work on it whatsoever, you will be stuck in level 1 where you're basically eating, sleeping, living off your desires and repeating. In order to transcend the levels, to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, you must put the work in. And that's why a famous scholar, he wrote a beautiful line of poetry that I want all of you to remember. He said, وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِن تَهْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرَّضَاعِ وَإِن تَفْطِمْهُ يَنْفَطِمْ. This scholar has said that the nafs is like a baby. If you leave the baby and you don't teach it to wean off the breastfeeding, it will always breastfeed until it's very, very old. It will always be dependent on that milk. Similarly, the nafs, if you don't do anything for it and you just let it depend on fulfilling its desires, it will always be stuck on level 1. But only when you put the effort in and go through the pain and the hardship of weaning this child off, getting it used to normal food, that's when it will stop. And similarly, the nafs, you need to do things over and over again to allow it to transcend and go from level 1 to 2 to 3, and you must never stop, because otherwise it will always be stuck on level 1. And so that is basically the nafs in a nutshell. So how does someone take control of the nafs? The scholars have mentioned 6 different ways that if you implement them and you persist with them, you will transcend these levels and eventually reach the highest caliber, which is an-nafs al-mutma'inna. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that level, say Ameen. So at that level, before we continue, just to give you like a snapshot, a preview as to how you know you're at this level and what this level will be like, to just kind of motivate you to get there. At that level, your only concern is the pleasure of Allah, not the pleasure of the people. Do you realize how liberating that is? If you live for the people, you will live in constant anxiety and depression. Always trying to see, what will make the people happy, and then some people get displeased with you and then it annoys you. But your only concern at that level is the pleasure of Allah. Whether the people praise you, dispraise you, whether they try and hurt you, whether they try and benefit you, all of it doesn't matter. Because your only concern is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It gives you a liberating feeling. You'll always be happy with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for you. If Allah takes away a limb, a child, some finances, whatever happens in your life, you will be completely tranquil with it. This is what it's like being at that level. And you'll taste the sweetness, no matter how much hardship is in your life, that wallahi will mix with your soul. It's like a Jannah on earth. And that's what it's like being on level 3 of the nafs. And so, as I mentioned, the scholars have given us 6 ways that if we implement them and we're persistent with them and we're consistent with them, we will reach that level. So are you guys ready, inshallah? Bismillah, let's do this. Number 1, you must allow yourself to be more hungry more often. How strange. Make yourself more hungry more often. Guys, one of the best ways to control your nafs, which is the part of you that desires things. Remember what I said at the beginning? Your nafs is the part of you that desires things. If you want to take control of the thing that desires things, is to not give it everything it desires. And since hunger is one of the best ways to do that, why else do you think the Prophet ﷺ taught us to fast so much? You have Ramadan, you have Mondays and Thursdays, you have the white days. And subhanAllah, even if you're struggling to get married, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصِّيَامِ. Whoever has the means to get married, let him get married. But whoever does not have the means, they should fast, because fasting will restrain his desires. Why do you think the Prophet ﷺ prescribed fasting? There's so much wisdom in this, because it allows you to take control of your desires such that your desires don't get let loose. Does that make sense? And so the very first thing the scholars have said is for you to allow yourself to be hungry more often. The second thing that the scholars have mentioned is for you to get up in the night to worship Allah. You have to realize that your nafs cannot and will not transcend to the highest levels unless you dedicate a portion of the night to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will never be able to reach that level unless you dedicate a portion of the night to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it doesn't have to be just praying. You can read Quran, you can make dua, you can do dhikr, you can seek knowledge. Any worship in that time is known as Qiyam al-Layl, which is getting up the night to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want you to really kind of aim to focus in the last hours of the night before Fajr, because these are the special hours of the night. That time is essential if you want to take control of the nafs. And subhanAllah, many things can be said about Qiyam al-Layl, I'm sure you remember from our class before, we spent a whole hour talking about Qiyam al-Layl, but the Prophet ﷺ, he highlighted the virtues of Qiyam al-Layl very beautifully in just one narration. He said, "Alaykum bi Qiyam al-Layl," hold firm to Qiyam al-Layl, which is basically getting up in the night and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For it is number one, the practice of the righteous people before you. So you'll be following in the footsteps of the prophets. Number two, it's a means of getting closer to Allah, i.e. transcending the levels of the nafs to level 3. Number three, it's a means of prevention and expiation of sins. Sins actually brings you down the levels, but Qiyam al-Layl prevents you from that, so you go up. Number four, it's a barrier for the body against disease. It will help you. It will literally change your physiology so that you're better equipped to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. You must get up in the night. Dedicate a portion to the night, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number three, and this is a very interesting one. Be quiet unless there is a good reason not to be quiet. I'm going to teach you something in Arabic, which is just, subhanAllah, it shows you how deep the Arabic language is. In Arabic, there's multiple different words for being quiet. Okay? Sukut, which is probably the one that some Arabs here might know, is the type of silence that is out of your control. So for example, if you're in a classroom and the teacher hears you talking with your friends and stuff like that, and you're causing a ruckus, the teacher will say, "Askut," be quiet. And so you're quiet because it's out of your control. Whereas a samt is a different type of quietness where you choose to be silent. You have control over it. This is the silence that we're talking about. Controlling yourself and not speaking at every opportunity is one of the most powerful ways to take control of your nafs. Because hunger is a big aspect of our life, but speaking, I would argue, is a bigger aspect of our life. And so controlling these two things gives you a firm plant in the ground for you to be able to control your desires and allow it to transcend to the highest levels. Number four, the scholars have said that you must increase in your thinking and your reflection. Thinking and your reflection. And they've actually said that thinking and reflecting is the best form of worship. If you think about it, it makes sense. One prayer with reflection, pondering about what you're saying, pondering, having that level of khushu' is better than 70 years of worship. Because from that one prayer, you will reach a level of iman that 70 years of worship without thinking or reflecting will never get you to. And so that's why the scholars have said that thinking and reflecting is actually the best form of worship. And so guys, get used to having reflection integrated in your day. Maybe block out some time where you spend just time with you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take a walk, look at His nature. Think about the verses of the Quran, reflect on them. Don't just skim past them. Just really start to deeply think about things around you, because wallahi, this is one of the best things you can do. Question your intention, question your sincerity. All of these things will allow you to transcend pretty much nothing else. It's one of the most powerful action points that I've given so far. Okay, that's number four. Number five, and for me personally, I would say this is the most important one of all from a long-term perspective. And that is to maintain good company no matter what. Guys, wallahi, I cannot stress this enough. If you want one of the best ways to take control of your nafs and transcend those levels, wallahi, the company you surround yourself with is one of the most important aspects. So if you know someone who's righteous, your friends, your teachers, if you know any scholars, literally try and sit with them, observe their character and mannerisms, absorb them, inspect how they view the world, how they deal with hardships, how do they deal with eases, and really try and take the good from every single person that you see who is committed, who might potentially be on that level of nafs as well. Why am I stressing this so much? Wallahi, I can speak for hours about good companionship, but there's one hadith which just puts this to bed. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ar-rajulu ala dini khalilih." A man is upon the religion, the deen, the way of life of his best friend. So let one of you look at whom he befriends. Your way of life, guys, is dictated by the people who you spend the most time with. The saying goes that, tell me your friends, I'll tell you who you are. Wallahi, it's true. I know so many people, me being on social media, I've seen people reach out to me, they say, oh, I was practicing and I went to uni and I surrounded myself with the wrong people, now I've committed zina. Now I've drunk alcohol. Now I've done this, now I've done that. Your friends, wallahi, they will affect you in ways like never before. I've recently come back from Mauritania. Me being in the environment with my sheikh transformed me. Those 6 months I spent there to start with, those 6 months transformed me like years haven't been able to do. Do you see what I'm saying? And so you need to find an environment where you're surrounding yourself with good people 100% of the time, because this is the greatest long-term gain and the greatest way to increase and elevate and go up the levels of the nafs as well, okay? So that's number 5. And finally, number 6, which is that you must consciously increase in your good deeds. If you apply all of these 6 different points that the scholars have mentioned, all I'm going to say is come back to me after 6 months and tell me how your nafs feels. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, jazakumullah khairan. We'll stop the recording. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.